Here we go. I totally forgot to tell everybody to mute themselves. That's all right. We are on air with dings and water bottles in the background. So happy Friday, guys. Today is June 19th. You're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can chat along with us on our Twitter chat, which is at hashtag CMGR Hangout, where I know a bunch of you are hanging out with us right now, in fact, watching the show. So if you love what you're seeing today, you want to maybe hang out with us on a Friday, or you have a good idea for a topic, head on over to mycmgr.com, click on the button Participate, I think it's at the top, and fill out the form. It's really your ideas and you who keep things going every Friday. We just show up last minute and press go live. So, all right, what do we have for you guys this week? Well, growing a community of innovators it can be a lot of fun. So not only are you surrounded by visionaries and big ideas, but you also get to regularly help celebrate their success. So, of course, it can also bring its unique challenges along with that. What we're going to do is just let the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the first question, and we'll start with Sherry. Hey, Sherry.
Sorry, I had to find the window as per usual. You would think that I would realize that almost every single panel I'm on the end, which means I start first. Hey everyone, I am Sherry Reddy, and I am the community manager at Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, as well as co-producer here for CMGR Hangout with Dom and Brew. And I apparently don't know how to use my words today, so this should be fun.
Awesome, and Harmony.
Hey everybody, I'm Harmony. I hopefully know how to use my words, but I did just get added to this panel like half an hour ago, so I am in my pajamas with my coffee cup. I have done a lot of different kinds of community work. The stuff I'm doing now is a lot around community building for startups and entrepreneurs, which definitely comes with its challenges, so I'm excited to kind of dig in with everybody about that.
Awesome, thanks for joining us. And Ed, how are you doing?
Hey man, how are you, bro? Hi everyone, and thanks for having me here. I'm Ed, as said. I'm the founder of eDublin. We're the largest Brazilian expats community based in Ireland. I'm super happy to have you guys. I think I'm going to learn a lot from you guys today, so cool.
Awesome, and Dom.
Hey everybody, it's Dom. Happy to be here when it's not, a motorcycle gang or a Mad Max, outside. Maybe you'll actually be able to hear me clearly. I'm a community manager for Be the Change Revolutions with Brew, as well as a co-producer here with Sherry and Brew. And Ed, it's funny you say that you're excited to learn from us. That's exactly why we brought you here, so that you can teach all of us about this stuff. So I'm excited to learn from you guys.
Awesome, and Brian.
Cool, I don't know who I'm learning from or teaching from, but Brian Fanzo, iSocial Fans on Twitter. I'm a tech guy to begin with, and so for me, excited to be here, excited to talk innovation and technology, of course. So it's been a while, so I miss you guys.
All right, and hello everybody. I am Brew, the director of Awesome at BTC Revolutions, and also co-producer here with Dom and Sherry. So excellent. Well, guys, before this first topic is all about, or the first question is, how has your community shown their innovative spirit? And Ed, I know we were talking just right before we went live, and we'd love for you to just chime in right away on this.
Sure. So I think it's a great question, actually. One of the things that we see a lot with expats, so to give some context, I think before just jumping into kind of what innovators or what kind of people we see, what happens a lot when you move abroad is that you're usually facing a total different culture. You're dealing with a different language, different time zone, everything. So I myself am Brazilian, living in Ireland for 7 years, so I had my challenges coming here. So what happens with challenges is you need to find workarounds for things. Usually you're not like, you don't know the best way of getting solutions for things you're looking for. So you need to be really creative with that. So what we see a lot here is Brazilian students or people who got their first job here, and they need to find ways, and to finance their studies or to pay the bills at the end of the month. So what they do a lot is try to find how can I make money out of what I know or what I learned in Brazil. So that's when we start to see some innovation there. And I don't want to jump into like the next steps, but I think that's kind of when we see a lot of people like who are on the same interest in finding answers, finding like how do I get my my money and pay my bills at the end of the month, or how do I get to explore the market that's unexplored here, or what did I learn from Brazil that I can bring here. So that's when we start to see the innovators coming in the community. I don't know about you guys if you've seen that much there, but I don't want to, again, jump into, I know we're going to get a couple of more questions later on that I can deep dive a little bit more, but that's what we see mostly here in Ireland.
So I work with an open source community, so it's very much a community of innovators, and it's really fun to have watched people over the 8 years that our product has existed kind of grow with the product and start their own businesses and really just change their lifestyles and everything with the success that they've managed to achieve by innovating with our actual platform.
I guess I can add that when you're working with entrepreneurs, that's innovative as sort of the definition of the people. So the folks I tend to work with are people who are thinking about like, how do I start a business? How do I start an organization? That's the whole conversation.
Well, yeah, I like to say that I need to put on my resume, or my background is translating geek speak. And I always like to say that part of that is really understanding not only where they're playing, but what they're talking about. So for me, I think it's a lot science major. I worked in cybersecurity for a long time, and for me it was a long time. I worked hard at trying to take them from where they were having and bringing them to another community, and I learned that doesn't really work. So for me, I really kind of focus a lot on really not only how you can drive spirit, but really where can you go to where they're playing, rather than trying to bring them somewhere else, because I think that's one of the mistakes we make when, especially for someone that's kind of an innovative, forward-thinking. They understand the power of collaboration, but they really value their time and value their kind of productivity and thought process. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer now that I go and play where they play and try to help grow the community and connect to the community, rather than just trying to transplant them from where they're at to where I'm at today.
So let's talk about encouragement then, as question number 2 is, how do you encourage innovation in your community?
I can jump into that as well. So I think as we started talking about the innovation in general, I think some people don't even know they're innovating. Obviously, if you're talking to an entrepreneur, they're trying to do that like as their core. But sometimes what happens is someone has just a need, and that's what usually happens. And again, I think we all been through that. When you have a big need or a big problem you're trying to resolve, you end up innovating or trying to find out creative ways of getting the solution. Especially if there's something that will cost you money or something like that. So that goes to like, what do we do to enable them? And I think we can divide this maybe in 2 parts. I think one is like a simple, and which is more like on the tools part of it. I know Brian might know this better than I do on the tech side, which is tools that can allow people to be innovative. Like if you think about a kid, if you give them like a pen and like a piece of paper, that's all the tools that they will need to make some creative drawing. Where if you're talking about a community, do you have enough to encourage them to post or to share or to create polls or create kind of like Hangouts? It's something innovative that was created by Google to make sure that we connect with each other, has no cost. So obviously you have like technology on that. But I think the other side of things is, how do we work, I think, as community managers in driving this, and sometimes it's by example, so sometimes you go ahead and do it first. So think about someone that's going to jump like on a parachute. You may go ahead and jump first so you can encourage them to jump after you, or you can just push them so they will jump anyways. So again, same to the community. Do you want to do it first and lead by example, maybe influence towards what you're doing, or maybe you go back and encourage them by, showing what others have done, or maybe presenting them with alternatives, or showing them like what can they do to get better at what the issues they're trying to resolve. And one thing that I was thinking about as an example as well was, you see people usually posting like on Twitter or Facebook something like, hey guys, do you have any suggestion of a really like heavy metal song that I can listen now? And you'd be like, oh shit, heavy metal song, what? And then you start to think about it. You have usually it's harder to come across like some answer, where if someone comes and posts like, hey guys, I need a song that's gonna boost my energy now. Do you have a suggestion? That may be like a much more broad question that will give opportunities to other people that are not heavy metal enthusiasts to jump in and give suggestions. So sometimes the way you deal with, or the way you want to encourage this innovation, may not be necessarily giving them the answer or giving them two specific points to discuss, but mostly opening up so they can pretty much figure out themselves. So that would be like my 2 cents around how do you encourage them.
Yeah, I think that's oh, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree on the sense that, part of it also comes down to, understanding that most of the time if you hear someone talking about they're innovative or they're innovating, those probably aren't the people that are actually doing it, right? Like those are the people that are the ones that are too busy talking about it. It's the ones that say, I want to do cool shit. They're the ones that, when I go to an event, there's Legos in the middle of the table of every developer innovation event that I go to. And the reason that is something as little as Legos and a piece of paper, like you were saying, can really spur innovation. So I think part of it is really providing and facilitating a culture that encourages collaboration and innovation, but also remembering that it's really those that are doing the shit, not talking about the shit, that are the true innovators.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of piggybacking off what you said. I mean, I love what you said there, Brian. The idea of creating that space for people to be able to do that. I love Legos because Legos is just like it's a tactile thing, and that works with my brain, and it sort of gets things moving along. But, that idea of like sort of creating that culture of, hey, this is what we like to do. We like having a community of innovators. I mean, call it exactly what it is. And if you provide that space, and if this is a culture that you're just starting, sort of tap in and look at what other innovative communities have done, and use that as a jump point. Be like, hey guys, this is what all of us would like to get to. So this is what they've done. Wouldn't this be cool if we could do it? And if you have been doing it, go back on your wins. Say, hey, something was like this, but this community member found a way to make it better. It's like that whole screenshotting the awesome that you and Brew talk about all the time. It's like, go back to it time and time again. Be like, hey, it sucked. Somebody made it really good, and sort of storytell that way to sort of, it's like a pep talk for them to continue on.
One of the things that I think is ironic, or I don't know, maybe not ironic, but interesting about working with people where innovation is kind of like the thing that draws them together, is that actually that can sometimes be what prevents innovation. So one of the things I found, I was just in Europe at some startup events, and I heard somebody in London pitch something that everyone in the room thought was really weird, but I know 5 different people who've built that startup already in America. So one of the ways that I supported her is actually to connect with those folks so she doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think this is sort of getting maybe a little bit into the question about challenges, but when you're working with a lot of really independent, innovative kind of people, everyone wants to come up with a new idea, and one of the ways to encourage innovation is actually to help build community so people can learn from what's already been done, see if their idea is already out there, and once all the existing ideas are on the table, then you actually can be innovative and not have just your personal experience of being innovative, but really for reals innovative in the world.
Comes down to part of this discussion is, when we're thinking about innovation, we're talking about it. Part of it also is, I love whiteboards. I love, when we're storyboarding things. I love truly getting people out there having conversations. But it's also, you have to almost expose your failures. I think a culture and a community for innovators is one that's very transparent, that allows people to say, hey, I just went down this rabbit hole, wasted my weekend, and this is what I did not accomplish, so that not only someone else learns from it, but really as innovators, it's amazing how many times I will facilitate someone path. So I think part of that, community, and maybe it's with innovators more so than a lot of other communities I've been involved in, is they have to be really, really tight-knit in the sense that they know that people will help with their failures, not critique or not really isolate them if they're, kind of talking about their failures. And I think it's hard to do, but it's amazing when you think about it. When you encourage people to explain their failures, you actually probably drive more success ultimately.
That's a really good point, Brian. Actually, I was going to mention that because I think people tend to be scared of sharing their failures or share like whatever they've done that didn't work that well or didn't go as they expected. And that's one of the things that if we facilitate that or make sure that this is not like a bad thing, like you learn from mistakes, right? That's like what happens to everyone. You can even help getting like fostering more communication, more discussion. So people will be, tending to help you out and hey, what can I do to help you and making sure that next time you don't fail again or don't do anything wrong, or what can I do that to prevent this from happening. That's a really good point. I think it happens a lot here. We've seen, like, I can give you a quick example. That's one member of the community here. He is from Sao Paulo, which is a city I'm from as well, which is a very busy city. Like, it's probably like New York, London. It's busy, has queues everywhere. I know San Francisco is known for having queues like in restaurants that are usually hippie and like all of that, but still, we have queues everywhere, right? So this guy came up with this idea in which it happens in Brazil already. So you have an app, so you can pre-order something before you actually arrive to the place. So when you get there, you don't need to get into a line or a queue, so you pretty much go in and just get your order. And it's just like on the way. It's not like an online version. You go on your app on your phone, and then he was like, yeah, this is gonna work perfectly here in Ireland. I'm gonna do that. But there's no culture here for that. So people were not used to come in and they don't have any line or any queue to be in, to just go in and grab your coffee or food. Like the queues are usually like 5 minutes. So he tried to apply this whatever learning he had from Brazil here. It didn't really work, and he pretty much shared. He was like, look guys, I tried to do this, it didn't work. So big mistake here. I spent a lot of energy in trying to figure out something. Find like someone who would be willing to work with me, because you have to deal with restaurants, pubs, and so on. So it's a lot of work to get them to buy the idea, and didn't really take off. So again, it's a learning. I know it's like an application and something, but he was trying to apply some cultural difference into something here and didn't really take off. So again, encouraging this and like making sure you can do that, it helps a lot.
So why? I'm gonna go a little off the script here. I mean, why do you guys? Why do we think that, or what are some of the reasons that people are afraid of failure, or afraid of admitting failure? Right? Like I hear so many times people say, "Oh no, it's good. Fail fast, fail often. It's great to fail. That's how you learn, right?" And so, but why? Why are so many people afraid to fail?
I think when it comes down to it, like even if you actually know that failure is the way to success and that you'll never succeed if you're not willing to risk failing, and that the people who are the most successful have probably failed the most, like you can believe those things, you can hear those things however many times you want, but you don't feel good when you fail, ever. Like you just don't, no matter who you are, no matter what. It's not a good feeling. And so sometimes it's hard to remember to be okay with that, in that it will lead to more ideas, and those ideas will lead to more successes. Because in that moment, it's not a positive thing.
No, I think that's spot on. And I mean, I talk a lot about this. But I also believe, to your point, Sherry, failure really sucks in the moment. But those that, when you embrace to the point that, this is the key, I think, and when we're talking failure, you have to know and be determined in your heart of hearts that you will not settle for failure. If you know that you will not settle for failure, failure is not scary at all, because you know it might last a little while, it sucks when you're in it, but you know you will not settle for it. I think the problem becomes when you're afraid you might settle for it, or maybe you don't have a support system around you. You don't have rock stars that can pick you up when you're like, hey, it's all right, you failed right now. It's okay that you haven't been doing what you're doing. Let's kind of build it back up. And I think the idea there also comes back to something else. Just because you failed doesn't mean everything you did beforehand leading up to that one point was wrong or didn't mean something. Because I think oftentimes we look at change and we say, well, now I realize that I need to change. well, I must have been doing everything wrong every other moment. And I think when we look at that, we say, well, actually, everything I did brought me to this moment so that I can learn in this kind of sucky moment of failure so I can be great. And I think that's kind of the different mindset. If you can truly look at something and say, I know I will not settle for failure, then failure does become a success. But I think you're right. A lot of people talk about failing fast, but as soon as they fail fast, they come in this deep dive hole, and it's hard to get out of. And I think it's ultimately it's about being determined and knowing in your heart of hearts that you won't settle for it, and the people around you won't let you settle.
And I think just to sort of add on some too, you know, a lot of times we've had plenty of conversations, and a really hot topic when it comes is proving, you know, ROI of social and stuff like that, of what you're doing as a community manager. I think that sometimes, and I've been, you know, guilty of this, like I'm scared to admit my failures because then I have to account for my failures to, say, like a CEO or somebody that's signing my paycheck that might not completely understand. You know, we can say all day that we understand the power of it, we understand the power of failures, but if there's a couple of those, especially if it's a new community, you know, you worry if your side of the business is on the chopping block, and if it is, then you know, you don't necessarily want to admit that, because then all of a sudden, you know, like, you could be out of a job.
Yeah, I think that's the other point on that as well, which is around trust. So people are afraid to share or afraid to fail because they are afraid to lose trust from others. So you have your credibility, you have your reputation, you have trust you have to build, and it may be super easy to lose all of that if you just fail, if you do something wrong. I know it's much more related to, you know, product or to how you work on things, but even like if you, let's say, it could be like a random example, if you go launch a platform to have deploy your community, and then you fail on that because maybe the platform crashed every time or whatever, people will lose the trust and be like, I'm not sure if I should go there more often because it never works or whatever, and you'll be like, hold on guys, are we a community now? Do I have the trust from you to make sure that we, you know, we'll go through this together? Or you're pretty much going to get people throwing stones at you and then like, yeah, let's move to something else. So you need to figure out like what's the balance between, you know, failing and then losing the trust, losing credibility, and then pretty much, you know, having people like against you rather than supporting you to what you're going to do.
Well, and to your point there, I think trust, we often think about it coming one way, right? We think of, oh my goodness, I have to have my manager needs to trust me. No, you have to trust your manager as well. And I think we sometimes put the onus and we say, my culture doesn't facilitate trust. My community isn't, and really or the manager and their team. But I think when it comes down to it, they do have to kind of take some of that onus on themselves as well.
Let me just bring in a couple tweets that I just happened to run across as we were talking about this. Here we go. So James, thanks for hanging out with us, James. James says that's easy because they don't feel that they have permission to fail. I think that's an interesting concept or comment, just because, you know, if you think about it, right, it pretty much, and I think what Constance is saying is, in my opinion, our culture is conditioned that failure isn't an option, right? I mean, for so long. So between these two, right, no permission to fail, failure's an option, it's the fear of the unknown. So this mixture of fear and really, from a culture standpoint, it is, right? I mean, when you do bad in school, you're failing school. Like the word itself has negative connotations. You know, and you know, I think for me, when I think about failing, when I think about failing fast, you know, what we can't do is use that as an excuse just to be a complete screw up. Like, it's cool, I'm just failing fast. But I will say, as somebody who has failed a lot in my life, eventually, just like working out, right? You get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know, that thing that Sherry had said before about, you know, it's not comfortable to fail. You actually get comfortable with feeling that way, recognizing it and knowing, okay, cool, this is I'm going into the learn mode now instead of allowing my lizard brain to take over and, you know, cower and hide and feel bad about myself and go into a 4-week depression. So.
No, and Brew, on that same point, my yearbook quote was "Go big or go home," right? Like, that was my yearbook quote. But I've now learned that it's actually not "Go big or go home." It's "Go big strategically, smart, learn while I'm going big," right? And I think that's something that's taken me I don't even know how many years to learn to figure out that go big or go home is still my motto. But now, if it's that Fred Flintstone idea, you touch the oven, it's hot. You touch it again, it's hot. You touch it again, you're an idiot. And I think that's the idea here, is that you have to truly learn from those mistakes. And you did it in a strategic way. What's the percentage of that happening? I think too often, I just failed because I had my web camera facing the other camera, and I could see all of your guys' faces wigging out that you saw your camera, or you saw your faces on my monitor. So now I just moved my web camera in the middle of a show, so now it's going to be kind of weird in the middle. But I figured I was going to fail, I was going to own it, and then we're going to kind of embrace it from there. So I'm living it right now.
And Bruce, to sort of jump on like what you're talking about working out, I mean, when you think about working out, especially like what Brian was talking about, like you can't just keep on doing it. Like you can't just keep on failing. When you work out, you are literally like tearing your muscle a little bit. And if all you do is keep on working out and you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and you're tearing and tearing and tearing, then that's not going to do anything. But you need to give yourself a little bit of time to repair, to build a little bit more, to become stronger. So it's not just the art of failing, it's what you do with the failure that actually really matters. And that's the point that everybody else said. But yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and Michael Boyce from Twitter also mentioned, failing fast really stems from agile software development methodology, which literally is like write your test, let it fail, and then program against that failure until it succeeds. And so you literally are failing fast, and I think that's I don't know if that's the actual root of that word, but thanks for pointing that out, because it is a little bit different than big life stuff. All right, so let's jump ourselves into the third question, which is what challenges? Is that right? Are we on 3? What challenges? All right, so I lost track talking about failing. So yeah, guys. So what challenges do you think? What challenges do you run into with an innovative community? I heard one of you before saying, well, and there's some challenges, but that might be the next question.
Well, that was me. So I think probably the biggest problem with managing a community of people who are innovative is that it's herding cats. So you've got all these people with all these independent ideas, and learning how to be a follower when you're trying to be a leader. I mean, at least personally, is something that I have struggled with. Like everything has to be my own original idea. Like I can't go to be in a community with people. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge is like, hey, slow your roll. There's something to learn from all these other folks as well. That's what I deal with.
No, I think it's a good point. I also think it partially comes down to, we talk about collaboration being a great sign and something great for things like the rights of your own. So I think a lot of times we want that to be the case, yet we also kind of reward people on an individual basis. So I think some of the hard part is how do you drive collaboration yet celebrate individual success?
Yeah, there's an interesting point on my end here, which is so because we're dealing with expats living abroad, what happens is they see what we're doing now on eDublin and so on. They think like we're millionaires. I don't know where they get that from, but they think we're like earning tons of money, and they want to create their own eDublin, right? So they become competitors. So they want to be innovators by, hey, I have a great idea. I'm going to create another website in which expats are going to talk to each other. And you're like, well, that's what we do, dude. So you're doing the exact same thing. You're not innovating anywhere. And in a way, I don't know if all the times this is a conscious thing. They just do it because they think it's the right thing to do, but indirectly they're competing with us, right? So they're like building another community with the exact same proposals, with nothing new to present. So it becomes literally like competition. And you're like, look, I mean, as much as you want to help here, this is not making much sense. And then it starts to become a little bit awkward because, like, do you keep them in your community and they're going to use your community to try to drive people to theirs? And then you're like, what do I do here? Do I kick them out? Do I respect them? We tend to really be respectful and never like, kick anyone out. But at the same time, if people start to, look at your community as like, a supermarket, like where they can pretty much promote whatever they want, that turns into a problem. That's when it's like, okay, that's the biggest challenge. Like, how do we deal with that situation?
No, I see a lot of people. I have Meerkat up here, and a lot of people are talking about ego. And I think ego is an interesting one, right? I think ego is one that we can't underestimate, really. People that are, like to your point, you said they saw what you did and then they want to copy it. Or they say, well, why would I just be a part of yours? Why don't I go start my own? And if everybody could start their own, there'd be no need for everybody to work as a team in the first place. And I think that's something that's really hard to kind of get people over, is that oftentimes the true root of the success is that you were part of that team throughout the process, and you can't just go do it on your own and just take a carbon copy and start from scratch.
Another challenge that I sort of am thinking of, and maybe I don't know, I'm just in this headspace of like talking to the C-suite, but when you think about an innovative community, I think about one that is changing quite a bit, that's moving around. It's kind of a moving target. So when it comes to sort of defining it, it makes it a lot more difficult. Like you could call it a defining an innovative community, but I mean that could just be, just mean, hey, I really have no idea what we are this week. Things are changing. So I think that that's definitely a challenge, especially when you're thinking about goals and you're thinking about where, you as a community manager are going to sort of move things, who you're necessarily, your influences are. You sort of understand that, but it definitely, it's not as static, so it's a lot harder to define.
Well, let's see. So what about, let's run into question number 4.
Actually, before we jump in, I just wanted to mention, Kristen Cardos on Twitter also mentioned that with the Community of Innovators, you might run into more resistance to authority as well, just because they're likely to be very independent and leaders themselves, which makes a lot of sense, and something that I have seen in innovative communities. And also sometimes it creates some animosity when they start to innovate and then compete with each other. And sometimes it's hard to kind of keep that in check and help people remember that, hey, like we're all in this together, like we are a community together, and how can we actually collaborate rather than just compete. So.
Great point. All right, so how do you help celebrate, or how do you help your community celebrate their success? So what are some good celebration? I think this probably even beyond innovation, right? Like, let's just talk in general about community success and celebration.
No, I mean, I love the idea of documenting the how and the why certain things get done, right? So like, don't just talk about what you did, but really kind of, almost do it from a standpoint of like, hey, let's build that story. Let's help you build the story. I think that's part of the reason I think when they talk about incubators being very successful, incubators for the standpoint, you're going to hide your notes from somebody because you're all working on innovative stuff and you don't want everybody to copy you. But at the end of the day, you really hope, because these people get you, that you're going to celebrate it. And now you can go through it and say, hey, this is what I did. This is how I failed. This is what we kind of documented. So for me, I love getting up there and giving someone the soapbox and saying, hey, story tell us. Don't tell us just what you did and how we want to know how and the why. Where did you, why was your inspiration for this, and how did you get where you're at today? I think those are things we can't overestimate when it comes to celebrating, the wins along the way.
Yeah, I was thinking. Go ahead, Sherry.
I was just going to say, basically just spotlighting them through case studies, really, to get that story out there better.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Like, I love that you said that, Brian. Like that, taking people through that entire story arc of where was the pain point, what did you think, like where did you, and then here's a great way to bring the fail thing back into it. Like, allow them to say where they failed along the way of coming up with the ultimate end goal of where it is. That type of a thing I think is super powerful.
Yeah, and I think there's another element there which is part of success and how do you celebrate, which is the recognition. I think people love to be recognized for what they do right, and it comes like it's a nature thing, it's something that comes from us. So if someone is doing something really well, if someone has a great idea, or someone has, even if it's a failure, like as Don was saying, just make sure that you call it out, like, hey, great for stepping in, great for trying this out, and make sure that you reward them somehow. It's like a recognition for them. So I think all of us in our roles, like, we do play a lot with people in their different stages, and people are still learning things, or who are like high up in, they're building like their third company, and still like they want to be recognized for what they do. So I think it doesn't matter who is calling this out, but as much as they feel that, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to like relating success to other success, right? Like I love, in the app world, you have like two apps that are just jumping into the market, right? And I'll relate this to Meerkat and Periscope from a live streaming perspective, since I'm living in that world right now. And for me, I always say, well, you realize Google was the 27th search engine. So, before we start saying which one's going to win, and if you had another tool that did something very similar, let's put in perspective how other companies have become very successful. And I'm not always a big fan of relating to saying, like, well, if Apple's doing it, then we should, because if you were Apple, you wouldn't be asking me for advice. But at the same time, I think there is an element there of, like, relating your success as well as relating to your failures to other people that you want to emulate along the way. And I use that Google example, I think, probably 3 times a day, it seems, because I think that's one we all kind of have to remember, that just because someone else is doing it or someone else is already in the market doesn't mean that you can't do it. It also means, like, I have a great infographic about Michael Jordan being cut from his high school basketball team. Oprah Winfrey was told that she has a face for radio and never be on TV. Albert Einstein being walked out of school because they thought he was mentally challenged. Like, those kind of things, when you think about those failures and how successful they became, it's really fun to kind of celebrate other people's success, because it is a long journey towards success for sure.
That's a really good point. I actually want to add to that, because you mentioned Google. I believe you were talking about Google Plus trying to make like a new social network, right? But I think the biggest learning there, and I know that because I'm working close with these guys, is that they built the best photos platform around that. So because they were learning how to build a social network, they identified that one of the things that users do the most is using photos. So they want to share, moments and pictures. So rather than trying to put all the eggs into one basket, what they learned is that, look, rather than trying to build a new social network, why don't we build a product around photos where people can share their photos, and we just work around that. So they launched now Google Photos as a learning from their mistake. Obviously, they have enough credibility to kind of keep failing, so they're going to fail more with Google Glass and other products. But I think they have enough credibility now to build that and recover users as well.
No, I love that, because Meerkat is very similar. I don't know if anybody knows the story of Meerkat, but Meerkat was a 2-day single project by one person of a 12-man development team that was working on another app, and it accidentally, or side project, end up is by far their most successful app now, and that's all in a matter of the last 3 months. And I think that's something important to think about when you're innovating and you're sometimes head down towards a set goal. I think when you're able to let people kind of spawn off, like, I would love to know how that person started working on that side project, because imagine if they don't work on that side project, is that company still in business at the point we're at today? So things like that I think are ones that are very interesting and very telling when it comes to innovation.
The same thing with Slack, Brian. Slack has just exploded everywhere, and they actually developed that just as an internal tool to solve their actual problem for their company that they were working on, that no one, well, I guess I don't know the full story, but it's certainly not as successful as Slack. I can't remember if they officially shut that part down or not, but it's just kind of crazy how they developed that as a tool for it, and Slack is what really took off and became successful when it was never actually intended to be that way.
And I think that that's a really awesome thing too. Like we're hearing all these things, like Google does it all the time. I think, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't parts of Gmail, like that kind of was a whole thing that, it's just, they set up those hours for people to just be able to do what they want to do, and these side projects and that innovation. And that's the cool thing about innovation. Number one, I love that we're talking so much about failure and making it okay, because it is okay, obviously. And then the second thing is, we're talking about small communities. None of us are running Google's community, right? So we're not doing that. But at the same time, from small communities to the biggest of the big, we talk about the scalability of things, innovation is super scalable if you do it right. And so that whole thing of celebrating the successes of actually running with a project, or putting somebody's name on it, or putting out a community blog post, for your company saying, yeah, community member, Brian Fanzo came up with this great idea, and then, it's not like he's going to get anything out of it. It's not like there's any residuals, but, just that feeling of, hey, I did something that works, from top to bottom, it's a huge thing, and it's really, really awesome.
I'm going to bring in, I'm going to rewind us just for a minute. And Christine, when we were on question 3, hey Christine, thanks for hanging out with us. She asked, bigger question, what do you do when you run into with a community that pushes back against innovation? So, what are some recommendations or ideas for Christine?
I recommend. I love that. I love that question. I love because that happens so often. And rather than nobody likes to be forced to change. And if you force back, if you fight directly back, all they do is fight harder just because they have nothing better to do. Really, it's one of those things that we really have to learn. So I use the phrase aspire to inspire. And really what I mean by that is, you know what, if they're fighting back, listen first and figure out what that underlying root of them fighting it is. If the underlying root, listen to their pain points, listen to why they won't embrace that change or embrace that innovation, and then when you hear that, then build a story, build a success, document things that actually solve that problem or kind of, I guess, address their pain point. If you just immediately turn around and say, no, you're wrong, no, I'm wrong, that just, it literally turns into a pissing battle that gets you nowhere. I've done it, and I speak because I've failed that way in a global enterprise deployment of software, and I had one executive that would not buy in, and I fought him every single week, and he refused to give in. I never got board accreditation. Later on, I realized, wow, if I would have just taken it and related it to his salespeople and found a way for him to get it that way, he probably would have bought in 6 months earlier than what it took me to do it. So I think when we're talking about fighting that change or fighting that people that are scared of innovation, it's listen to why they're scared and then kind of address that rather than just
We all just sit silent.
Can I just add to that? Sorry, like for a moment you froze, Brian, but I was getting your answer there, and I kind of buy the idea as well. I think if you try to change anything, you will create enemies, you will create haters, and I just want to make sure that we're talking about not about trolls or people who are actually going to be against by the sake of being against whatever you do, but if let's say someone's making criticism against something that you're trying to build or change, or whoever's trying to build or change, that's totally fine as long as it's like, it has some value in what you're sharing. But if it's literally like someone just trying to annoy people or just be against for the sake of being against, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't even listen to these guys. That's like to be ignored.
Haters gonna hate.
Yeah, so you just gotta shake it off, right?
Just shake it off.
All right, so let's, guys, we will, so for everybody watching or hanging out with us on Twitter, please feel free to tweet a couple questions over to at mycmgr, and we'll probably have time to bring them in. So our last question before we go and crowdsource is, how has your community had an impact on you personally? Wow, this is a cool one. Who wants to talk about that?
I'll jump in. I'll just jump in on the idea that, for me, part of it comes down to lessons I learned was, when you surround yourself with yes men and you fail, there's just a lot of people that tell you the same thing over and over again. You really don't learn from it. So for me, part of it was this self-awareness idea where I had to learn from my community. They taught me what I didn't know, and then I focused on building people around me that knew what I don't. And I think that is a key to success when we're talking about collaboration and innovation, is you don't need a bunch of people that have the exact same skill sets. You have a bunch of people that share a same purpose, share a similar passion, but they complementary skill sets. And I think that was one that it took me a while to, I started, I really wanted, I wanted computer science people around me. I wanted people that talk too fast. I want, like all these things that were very similar to me. But then when you surround yourself by other aspects, I think that is a powerful, game changer.
Yeah, I may be biased to say how this changed me personally, but because of Dublin, like I don't know if I do this bit because I'm not talking on behalf of Dropbox, but I'm community manager at Dropbox, and I got the job there mostly because of Dublin. So it obviously made a change in my life. So I'm dealing with this now every day with communities.
See, there's a success story we should be celebrating.
Yeah, right.
I think that, anytime you have a community, like if the way that I look at it, like anytime you're in a community and you're really working with one, like if it doesn't change you in a little bit in some way, you haven't really given your actual effort into it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the communities that I've worked with, I started and I worked with a community in for student exchange, and it's not like I was super passionate about it, but at the same time, like it definitely, you know, changed me. I learned things from it. I interacted differently in the communities, and, you know, moving forward, you know, took good ideas and let go of the bad ones. And, you know, I think that that's the really important thing, is, you know, just trying to move forward with that.
Well, if you're not willing to learn in every conversation and everything you're doing, you're missing out. I mean, in the honor of Father's Day, I have 3 daughters. They teach me stuff on a daily basis, and so if you're not willing to learn from people that are, you know, I think that's mainly even a millennial problem as well. Is millennials are upset that others won't learn from them, but millennials won't learn from Gen Zers or won't learn from, you know, I think it's all about finding ways to learn from everybody. I am super open to, I don't care what your experience is, what your knowledge is, you can teach me something. I think that is truly impressive when an innovative company does that and they create a culture that allows you to learn no matter what your role is. That's when innovation really takes off, and I think it's a hard thing to do, though.
Brian, how fast can you braid one of your girls' hair? That's the real question.
Ooh, braid, not good. I'm not the greatest at braider. I have big beefy mitts. My big old beefy fingers are all make braiding hard. But
those Pittsburgh sausage hands don't do well for braiding.
Well, you know, and breaking, you know, dislocated anybody else because they're daddy's girls. So.
I'll say that my community, I was originally a community member of before I became a community manager there, and actually through that is how I got involved in community management. I didn't go directly to being a community manager at this community, but jumped to one of our industry partners, and because of that learned how to live as an expat in Canada, which is not as huge as like jumping cross-continent, so I can't take a whole ton of credit, but there's still different things like learning kilometers per hour instead of miles per hour and Celsius instead of Fahrenheit and double taxes and all kinds of ridiculousness that comes with it. Getting used to money that looks like monopoly money because, let's face it, our U.S. money is not super colorful. So just little things like that, and then learning new job skills, to push myself and grow myself both on our platform that we use as well as in the community industry, and then using all of that to come full circle back to the community with experience as a solution integrator, with experience as a technology partner, with experience as a merchant and developer, and being able to bring all that full circle to really know like where my community's coming from, because they pushed me to walk through their shoes over the last few years.
One of the things I love about working with startups and entrepreneurs is that you kind of have to be slightly delusional to want to start something that big. So you have these people that are these like crazy dreamers that don't follow the rules and don't do things the way that they're supposed to be done, and that has me sort of look at my life that way. I mean, you know, sometimes obviously there's lots of folks who start things and it doesn't work out, but I'd rather have a life, to sort of go back to the conversation about failure, where I fall short, but I fall short in pursuit of like really crazy, wonderful things. And sometimes I forget that I have such an like awesome, unbelievable, extraordinary life, partially because I am not really attached to doing things the way they've always been done. And I think that's a really big thing that I've gotten from being in those communities.
Yeah, well, I mean, something for me personally is I found my passion, I identified my passion because of the people that actually worked for me. I went back and was doing some reverse mentoring, and someone actually told me, we were going over, and I said, I love technology and I love social media and what I was doing, and ultimately I had built a team, and someone that had worked for me over the last 8 years came to me and was like, no, it's really about change. And, you know, for me, that was a huge learning, because I couldn't see it at the time. But I think being able to have that self-awareness, but also allowing people that are truly honest with you, you know, in your community to kind of teach you things personally, is beyond inspiring, because it helped me make decisions in my career that I wouldn't have done at the time if it wasn't for a community that was willing to, kind of call me out and say, no, it's not really technology that you love, but I think those are kind of things we
Yeah.
For me, just the impact that this community here, my community manager, has had on me is, it's really shaped my thoughts. It's shaped my interests. I've literally gone out and read articles, bought new books, studied topics that I didn't think related to being a community manager. And if really, this community for me has really pushed my thinking process beyond, not hanging out with like-minded people. And it's also, I think, another great thing about community, which I think we can all relate. I mean, I've built some amazing friendships that'll last the rest of my life because of this community, and even coworkers, right? So lots of great stuff has happened, and had just huge impacts on me. So.
Can I ask a question on that? Sorry, Sherry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask a question that's more like a follow-up on the how did it change you personally. Did you have to learn new skills, or did you learn new skills by becoming a community manager?
So, well, I would say that probably like my attitude towards life, like made me a good community manager, or like ready to become a community manager. But it was really deep diving into all the different topics that allowed me to grow as a community manager. So, for instance, I remember we've had several topics just on gaming and gaming theory in general, and that just got me interested in like this whole reward system and why do what when you're developing a video game, what do you think of, and all of that stuff. And so by learning a lot of these principles, maybe I wouldn't learn normally. I can start seeing things through a different, really through a different lens. So I think the more you open yourselves up to like how humans tick, how you can manipulate the brain, so to speak, those are things that help you in your journey as a community manager.
You can't underestimate the group therapy element, right? I mean, we're all. We're not alone. Change sucks. We are all fighting this damn same battle together. But I know that for me, it's like if you're having it's one of those things that you're like, I can tune in on Friday and know that these people get me. And it is something that and I don't take that lightly, because I think oftentimes to stay motivated, to stay driving down a path that we know is right, it really does take working with great people that are doing great things. And sorry, Dom, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. I mean, I agree with exactly what you said, and I think I said it last week. It's like that's what's wonderful about communities like this. It's just like we can all talk about it, and it's like, yeah, I don't have to go into deep details like I do with my buddy Ted. Like, you guys all sort of get it. But the other thing, in sort of speaking of what you were talking about, Ed, when it comes to skills, like I think for me personally, a lot of it is like, yeah, I've learned a lot of technical skills. Ways to do what I do faster, ways to do what I do more efficient, learning tools. But one thing that I actually learned a lot is the skill of tapping into past experiences, which, we talk about it a lot. Community manager, what makes a good community manager, there's not like a specific job you should have for your community manager. Like, I take stuff, I've talked about it before, like I was an elf at a Santa Claus set for 2 winters. Like, I take a lot of that and what I learned working in that job to then put it into this, or when I played poker, or when I was a paper boy, or when I worked at a bank, like all those different types of things. So it's that skill of being able to go, hey, I did a lot of shit before, but how can I take that and apply it to right now? I think that's what makes a good community manager, because it makes you able to see life from a lot of different perspectives. You can hear a lot of different voices. Some people tell me to not listen to all the voices in my head, but sometimes it's good to.
I just have to ask. I asked in chat. Did you say an elf, like that, the alien dude?
Yeah, Brew. Yeah, Brew. I was a Christmas elf. I would only eat kittens that had little Santa hats on it. No, an elf, bro. Come on.
I just imagined you as like, kill me!
Host a Christmas. Yeah, the Lansing Mall in Michigan was very specific. We didn't have enough budget for Santa Claus, but there was an elf costume out back.
It must have been. That Southern drawl's coming out now that you're down in Austin. All right, what do we have time for? We have time for one question that came in here from Laura. Laura asks, what about getting to know each other's community? What makes yours tick? Who is the typical community member? So who wants to just talk about one of the current communities that you manage?
Also, I think we're going to make this a future topic, but if anyone on panel today wants to just kind of quickly answer it, we've got like 3 minutes. No one.
All right, so Laura, here's the cool part. No one wants to answer this because it's probably they're like in only 4 minutes. So thank you. We'll make sure to tweet you, and we are going to build an entire Friday around your question. So
see, folks, it's that easy. Just tweet in ideas, and you can get an entire show built around it.
Awesome. So speaking of ideas, Sherry, what's going on next week?
So next week we are talking Twitter chat communities, and we'll actually have Sarah Niggle, who's usually on the Twitter end of things, on panel talking Sprout Chat. We have Nicole Brooks from Buffer Chat, and then we also have Kristen Cardos, who manages like 100,000 chats, most of them Brian's a part of. But
yes, Kristen Cardos is a rock star. I'm going to tune in and take
what all does she do? Social Business Hour, Millennial CEO,
and Cloud Talk.
And Cloud Talk.
Yes, she is an amazing community manager. She's not only community manager for them, but I say she's the only Meerkat and Periscope community manager because she gets in there and helps me on my communities for that as well because she cares that much. That's awesome. I Twitter chats changed my career. So I think that's a must tune in next week. And Kristen Cardos, actually all 3 of them. Nicole I've worked closely with, and of course Sarah, loved seeing how she's grown that community. That's a rockin' panel. That's being must-see TV next week for sure.
Yeah, and we're still looking for more guys. So if, for all of you watching, if you know someone who runs one or more or many chats, please go to our website at mycmgr.com, click on participate, and let us know who they are and how we can get in touch with them. So thanks, guys. Have a great weekend. All you fathers out there, have a great Father's Day weekend. That's it. We'll see you next Friday.
Bye, everyone.